how when they get to America, they just kind of morph and take on a different tone, texture, and shape. And all of a sudden, it's the hipster dude thing on the bi-coastals and the Silicon Valleys. And, shit gets a little mixed up here when it gets, it's been on a 3,000, 5,000 year journey.
Well, for sure. Well, it always fascinates me that we use the phrase new age to describe things that are thousands of years old, like meditation and astrology and, crystals and all these other things. And we're like, oh, well, it's new. And it's like, well, it's not new. It's actually like ancient,
Right.
but we just don't have like the scientific evidence to back it up. So then we use this pejorative term, new age, to just sort of like put it in some category where we don't have to take it seriously. But yeah, like ayahuasca is a great example of something that's been around forever. I think a lot of, like yoga would have been the perfect example. Now it's something that we all accept and is like great. But like in the 70s and 80s, it's like, oh, it's for these hippie kooks, these new age people are all, and like, kind of looking down upon people who practice that as being, striving for some, Eastern shine on their wellness practice. But now all of a sudden we're like, oh no, they were totally right and ahead of the curve as far as Westerners go.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's happening in the West a lot, where we're just sort of like catching up to ancient wisdom that, like, in a lot of countries, especially in like the East, there's like, oh, these things are completely commonly accepted. And we're just sort of being like, oh, you know what we just figured out? Yoga is good for you. And it's like, yeah, you just figured that out. People in India have known for a while.
Which, by the way, you just segued into something I was thinking as you were talking, just so as I delve into one of my favorite modalities, yoga, which I've been doing for about 25 years or so. When I started yoga in Santa Monica back in the early 90s, it was this very there weren't a lot of people doing it, but YogaWorks, which became the popular company that ended up selling to big VCs, and it started expanding and taking over the world, especially in the US. All of a sudden, yoga became like aerobics. All of a sudden, it became this thing that was completely detached from the very nature of what it was intended for. And now, I think even with COVID, yoga studios have been shut down by and large. Yoga's kind of lost its essence. And I hope that's not true for people who are doing yoga at home, or they are still.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Because it's not happening in a group setting, it's losing its essence?
No. Even before COVID, yoga became this very commoditized, manufactured, cookie cutter kind of like as many teachers as these yoga studios can get through the teachers training program, whether they just started doing yoga yesterday, they get them through the training program, they charge them $1,500 to $3,000. Why? Because that's where they made their money. So yoga became a widget, a teacher training widget, and pumping out all these teachers. Right. You get into a yoga studio. Well, the yoga teachers I worked with early on in the first at least 10 years, 15 years, these people had deep, long practices, lots of wisdom, lineage teaching practices, down from teacher to master to teacher to master to pupil. The people that are teaching yoga, by and large, to fulfill all the yoga studios that have existed over the last 5-10 years, dude, literally, like, they have like next to nothing training. Like, they pay a couple thousand, $3,000. They go through an 8-16, maybe it's a slightly longer program. And then all of a sudden they're a yoga teacher, and somebody shows up. They've never done yoga before. And they're like, oh, this is yoga. But what happens is it's literally skating on the surface. And so, by the way, this happens on the show. Sorry. This is Rob getting on his high horse about the things he cares deeply about. But I digress. Yoga has become very superficial as a practice in the US, I think, as well in Western countries.
Sure, I can see that. And I feel like it's a theme that we come back to a lot. It's like, also, this is what Western, rational, scientific-based, capitalism-focused society tries to do to anything that comes. Like meditation is like, we're like, okay, how do we bring in Buddhist meditation but just divorce it from all this Buddhist stuff? How do we make it clean? and secularize it and make it have nothing to do with religion, and turn it into something that makes people be more efficient, and helps them accomplish X, Y, and Z goals that they have on their to-do list. And in the process, it's sort of like we think we can just isolate the thing about it that's like going to make us better, and then get rid of anything that seems extraneous without recognizing the holistic sort of path of how it all works together. To use examples that we've had in the show, the way Michael Pollan talks about scientists trying to isolate the soul of a carrot, or try to isolate the healthy part of a carrot and just put that in a pill, and they can't do it because there's something about the soul of a carrot that can't be replicated.
Yes. And you know what? I was actually it's funny you went with the soul of the carrot, where I was thinking of you describing sort of how we do this with all of these healing arts. I was thinking about an episode, in fact, we did on juice fasting, extracting the pulp from the juice and throwing the pulp. It's the pulp that actually is good for you. It's good for the fiber. You're getting rid of all the good shit. That's what's happening to yoga.
Yeah. But at and it used to be all orange juice came with pulp. And now at the supermarket you go and there's 55 different kinds of like some pulp and no pulp and vitamin C added and all this other stuff. It's like, so have we improved? Like, this is also another theme, like technology coming out with all these improvements, that it's like, okay, I understand this thing is making money for someone, but is it actually like making us healthier? Is it actually like doing good things for people's bodies and minds?
Not so sure. Not so sure anymore. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I also think, I don't know. It's just sort of this. Well, let me ask you: how do you think capitalism in America is doing right now?
I think capitalism is having a little bit of a some deep growing pains. Maybe that's a little bit of understatement. Capitalism is having a little bit of a seizure. It's having a little bit of cardiac arrest.
So here's, in general, I can be kind of cynical about it, but like if I wanted to look for an optimistic view on it, a lot of the pain that we're going through as a society right now, and the issues we're having with politics and capitalism and technology, is that from psychedelics you learn this, and from exercise, that there oftentimes is a period of pain or suffering that you must go through in order to get to anything transcendent. That you have to, when you're doing yoga, there may be a painful period, but like afterwards you feel amazing. That when you're giving birth, it may be the most painful thing in the world, but then you have the transcendent experience of having a child. That when you're taking psychedelics, you may feel nauseous and ill and vomit at first, but then on the other side you see the interconnectedness of the universe. And that, even traveling, I think, is a good example. When you travel to a foreign country, at first you're like, I don't speak the language, I feel alone, I don't know, you're scared and isolated, and yet afterwards, traveling, can be like, one of the most illuminating experiences that you can have in your life. And so I that's something that when I try to view things more optimistically, is to remind myself that oftentimes you don't know, when something feels painful, you don't know the context of the entire surrounding and what you're going through and what's on the other side of it. And that sometimes that pain that you're experiencing is actually growth. And that there is something better once you can get through it, but you can't just give up in the middle of it.
I would agree with that. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think the birthing analogy is true, although I wouldn't know about that. Although when you speak to women who have had a baby for the first time, they go, fuck, this is incredible. I'm never going through that again. Year goes by, 2 years go by. Hey, honey, let's have another baby. But I think that, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. As an entrepreneur and starting a lot of companies and advising young entrepreneurs, there came a time when people would say, oh, can you give me that one piece of advice? And you'd like, okay, let me figure out how to codify a piece of advice. Okay, here's a piece of advice. Like, if you want to be an entrepreneur, get really comfortable with the discomfort. Last night I was on the Clubhouse app. Elon Musk was in a room, the Good Time Room, which got a lot of play and lots of media today, as you would imagine. And he's made this statement, and I'm going to botch it up, but about what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And he said a couple of things. First of all, he said, if you're wondering, like, like what it might be like to be an entrepreneur and like, would it be a good thing for you, a bad thing? Don't be an entrepreneur, because being an entrepreneur is like lying on the floor chewing glass. It's just that painful a lot of the time. Now that seems like what the really being an entrepreneur, starting a company. No, really, it's like being difficult. And to your point about capitalism, capitalism's going through a squeeze right now. We've got a very determined, wealthy elite class who are really good at consuming money and making money. And there's an old saying, the what is it? The rich get richer and the poor get babies, right? That's kind of like sort of a
Never
global.
heard that.
Yeah, the rich get richer and the poor. So money begets money. We've got to find a way, to your point, to create some economic justice, to create some parity in the society, because without it, capitalism cannot survive. Oh, by the way, lest we forget that the very people that industry and consumer product companies, et cetera, and banks and Wall Street and Madison Avenue, they sell to the masses, the consumers. But if the consumers don't feel part of this system and don't have money to afford it, where do we go from there? So I think, to your point, we got to go through a little pain, get a little gain, and perhaps on the other side have that spiritual awakening.
Yeah, and it's funny because the one thing, as far as like the conspiracy kooks and all like the people who attack the Capitol and stuff like that, and the infighting that's going on in the Republican Party right now, bizarrely, one of the things that gives me hope is the evils of capitalism will not allow these crazy people to take over the lower my taxes party. I think there are forces on Wall Street and people with a lot of money that are on the phone with Mitch McConnell right now who are telling him, you got to do something about this. This is not acceptable to us. And if you want the faucet to remain running, and you know what kind of faucet I'm talking about when it's Mitch McConnell and a lot of these people, that you're going to have to like rein in these crazy people because it's a bad look. We want low taxes and more money. We don't want to be associated with the Jewish space lasers. That's going to be a problem for us. And so like, it's funny to me that I feel some amount of safety of like, you know what? I think in the end, the people who want lower taxes and forever wars are more powerful than the gun nuts and abortion freaks.
Hey, now, absolutely. By the way, let's not forget that, and I'm sure you've seen the meme that, it was Nimoy and Shatner with the space lasers, two Jews,
That's
it
true.
could be true. It could be real. Who knows? I mean, Marjorie, what the hell her name is? Taylor, whatever.
Taylor Green.
Yeah, well, okay. Another story. However, let us be clear that we clearly love talking about these subjects. We may even talk about this subject on the Health and Wellness podcast, so long as we are talking about it in the context of how does it affect the health and wellness of not only individuals, but communities and culture and society and government. Because, it's kind of like you are what you eat. You are what you consume in terms of belief systems as well. And this does affect the health and wellness. Like, I'll bet that the health and wellness quotient relative to, maybe the right side of the media, landscape versus the left side of the media landscape, somehow how you vibe with that, how you vibrate is got to affect how you see the world. Are you angry? Are you joyful? What effect does that have on you sort of, physiologically? So we're going to we look at that. You and I talked the other day about the notion of, health and wellness, and is the framework and the subject matter and the topics that we cover on the podcast. But this is really a show about philosophy and life and the sort of interconnectedness of it all.
Yeah, I mean, I think, boy, I had some thought on the philosophy of it all as you were talking.
You want a shiitake mushroom, or you want a?
Yeah, I might need something. I don't know. I got hung up on all these wealthy people, and what you were saying was reminding me of really like how much we're bathing in rage right now as a society, the outrage and anger and vitriol that we're feeling, and something from, you know, wellness and mindfulness and therapy and things that when I see all that, what I really see is a bunch of people who are really lonely and disconnected and sad and feel like they're being left behind, and that there's actually like a crisis going on in mental health and in, you know, our interpersonal communications that's manifesting as all this like political venom. But you know, it's uh, under the surface as this like loneliness epidemic that we're experiencing, and then compounded by social media, which is incentivized towards hate. Like, we know the name of Marjorie Taylor Greene. Is there any other Republican, you know, rookie congressman who we know the name of? So
No.
is she right or is she wrong to be taking the approach that she's doing when we live in a culture where, you know, your clout score, number of followers, or how many people tweeting about you is the way we measure success? So on some level, she's doing what social media incentivizes her to do, and we all are, or not all of us. Like, you know, you're pretty good at being off social media, but like I see it a lot of like, yeah, it's like, oh, this is a machine. This is a machine designed to make me feel bad, and that's actually it's not a bug, it's a feature. And if you want to dive even deeper under that, it's
All
that
right,
feeling
Matt,
of
take me off.
wait, let me finish this. Let me finish. It's
Tangents.
that
I'm not-
feeling of anger and rage is something that we actually crave because it makes us feel alive, because all we're doing is sitting alone staring at screens all day.
Matt, are you on an angry tirade? Are you on a health and wellness angry
I think
tirade?
this is a joyous tirade. I'm pointing out
Okay.
why we're acting, why we're throwing these tantrums all the time.
I look at anger, and you touched on this. I look at anger as the first responder to sadness and loneliness. It's
Ooh,
the
that's a good one.
responder. You like that? Is that
Yeah, do that.
you like how I brought it back? No, really, it's like the first responder. It's our first gut instinct is we're gonna bash somebody or break some shit or, you know, blow it all up. But underneath, as you touched on, is some real sadness, some real disconnection, some real loneliness, which, as you allude to, social media is part and parcel to exacerbating, amplifying that feeling. Is social media the cause of it? I don't know if it, in my view, if it's the cause of it. I think that it's
It's
just
the magnet that keeps pulling us towards that direction.
right. But I do think that's exactly right. I do think that social media, much like Trump, see if I can connect these dots, are really exteriorizations. They're manifestations in form. President Trump, ex-President Trump, uh, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they're physical manifestations of the evolution of the mind and our species. And we put them into a form, and they're clearly tapping into something that we connect with, positive or negative, a lot of negative. But how do we get to the point? Because I think sadness and anger are two things that obviously can affect you from a health perspective, from a physical perspective. Loneliness, for sure, we know the loneliness epidemic absolutely leads to suicide in youth and things like this. But how do we get to a point where we acknowledge this as a society, that this is really a health and wellness emergency, and that anger is the first responder? And the moment we see it and experience it, we pay attention to truly what's underneath.
I mean, it's a little naive, but I do think that this is where psychedelics, you know, plays a big part. You know, I think we need healing, and I feel like marijuana and psychedelics are. I mean, here's where I'll put my hippie hat on. Like, I think that's the planet trying to reach out to us in order to help us heal and get back to this sort of notion that we're all connected, and some amount of empathy and more to a place of coexistence and sustainability.
Yeah, somewhere along the way, we lost our connection to each other and all things. And just to kind of like play through in your hippy dippy approach, like there is no separation between any of us. We think there is. There's this, as Lily Tomlin, who people know from the, what's the Grace and what's the one with Jane Fonda, that show?
Grace and Frankie.
Grace and Frankie. I know her from the old days. I won't talk about how old those days are, but she did do a one-woman show where she, in her one-woman show, and her character said, define reality as a collective hunch. I love that. Reality is a collective hunch. How do we know it's true? Well, we all think it's true. But the notion that we are all individuals having separate journeys and that we do not affect each other, that we are individuals not connected to the atmosphere and the trees and the soils and the mushrooms, is just friggin' Harry Carey. We might as well just fucking commit Jim Jones, drink the Kool-Aid suicide. Perhaps that's what we're doing. I don't know.
Yeah, but they've sold it to us as an improvement. I mean, I think technology is responsible for a lot of this, for isolating us, apart from each other and giving us the illusion of being connected to each other. And, what are all these guys on this Reddit, Wall Street Bets forum, and all these people who believe in QAnon, and, there's these Twitch people playing video games with each other. Like, it's the illusion of connectivity as opposed to actually being together in a room, which in my life has been something that I've gravitated to, with people together in a room listening to music, people gathering together in a room and laughing at because of a comedian, like live theater, and restaurants, anything that's actual human beings being face to face with each other is, to me, some exponentially, better and qualitatively different experience than whatever we're doing over screens. And yet technology has kept selling us this, like, no, it's just as good. It's virtual reality. Isn't this exciting? You get to, walk into a fake bar and talk to a fake person and, do all these things. Isn't this just as good? And we keep going along with it. I just feel like we've been conned.
So
it's hurting all of us, but it's doing it slowly and in a way that we don't recognize. And that's why it's like we keep just like, it's sort of like the frog, where the frog is being boiled slowly. And because it's happening slowly, we're not realizing we need to jump out of the pot.
Yeah. So let's think about this for a second, because let's just play the notion that, Elon Musk and others are right, that this is just one big simulation. We've read about this, we've heard about this, we've even talked about it a little bit. So imagine it's a simulation. This is one big game, this sort of life global experience. And in the game, back in December of 2019 in Wuhan, China, and in the US, January, yesterday was the 1-year anniversary in the US. There's this thing in the game that gets introduced called COVID-19, the virus. And what does it do? It creates a global timeout. And what does it do? It forces us to be either alone if you don't have family and living with someone, or a significant other. It forces us to be on our screens even more. We're doing this thing here together. We could be doing this even though we live in different cities. We could be doing this together. So in this game, it forces us to take a time out. Let's look at the positive aspects of this. Luckily, we do have the internet and these screens to connect us in this way, because I can imagine, you know what? Perhaps I haven't imagined enough what it would be like without a Zoom in 2020 and 21. But what lessons from a health and wellness perspective can we learn by taking this simulation? Okay, we're in a game. That's it. That's the conceit here. Global timeout. What could we be learning from this in getting quiet? We don't travel as much. We don't have dinner parties as much. But there is a sense of oneness if you think about it. We are all in this together. One last point on this. The Rohingyas, that we hear about that are being persecuted, the people in Myanmar who are now, the military taking over, Aung San Suu Kyi's government. I look on television, I'm like, oh my God, they're all wearing masks. Like me, we're all in this singular consciousness called protecting ourselves from the virus. like there's got to be some positive out of this.
Yeah, it's the most unified the world's ever been, probably, of going through something together at the same time. I agree. I think that I guess in the beginning stages of it, this was definitely a feeling that I had that, like, wow, this represents a real opportunity. That, like, the just what's happening in nature, the sea life returning to the canals of Venice and the smog disappearing in LA.
You loved it in the first 3 weeks, I'll bet, but then, oh shit, it was like 9 months, right? Like
Well, yeah, I'm not even talking about me personally. I'm talking more about, like, okay, us as a society. This is like an opportunity that, like, okay, everything's been, pause has been pressed. Reevaluate. It's time to examine what your reality is, and do you want to keep doing it? And I guess as time has gone on, in part because the response has just been so disappointing. It's like there isn't this sense of, like, oh God, we're in this together. We need to rally and be around each other. It seems to have divided us even more and put us into our silos even more. And I think, but yeah, I guess naively, I was hopeful in the beginning that, like, oh, there's a lesson here that we're all gonna have to come together, because it's the only way we're going to get through this.
Yeah, I still think that possibility exists. Unfortunately, it was politicized very heavily in our country, which is a whole nother topic for another time. But I really still believe, this is like uh, the one event in all of our lives. If you are alive, whether you're 110 years old, assuming there's another 110-year-old out there, or you're just born today, we are really all in this together. And the idea that we can use that on an existential, on a metaphysical, on a philosophical, on a spiritual level, and just subscribe to the reality that we are all in this together, that we are this one global unit. And how can we use this pandemic as a way of raising our consciousness such that we can really see that there is no separation between any of us?
Well, until rich people call up to get the vaccine first and try to figure, it's like, we're all in this together. Yeah. There's a vaccine. Well, okay, who's really going to get it first?
We got to rise above that as well. I get that. And that shit's going to happen. And it's never going to not happen in a society that is driven by capitalism and money and who's got the most of it. Right.
Well, can I role play a guy trying to jump the line for the vaccine? Can I?
Sure.
So
I know these people, but go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm like some venture capital guy in San Francisco or New York or LA, and this is me explaining why I think I should get the vaccine first. So it's I've been talking to my concierge doctor about how I'm willing to spend the money. That's not the issue. And really, the reason I think I deserve the vaccine, even though I'm not in one of the groups that's technically supposed to get it, is because I'm a job creator, Rob. So you got to think about how much I give to the world at all times via my health. So I'm creating all these jobs, and it's not just that. It's my homes that I have, in St. Bart's and Aspen and in Mendocino, and you think about there's maids, there's groundskeepers, there's drivers. All these people are being employed. And if I don't have the vaccine, it also means I'm not going to be able to host my dinner parties where I usually have dozens of people there. It's going to be we've been doing them anyway, but it's too risky, more risky than it needs to be. And also I need to mention my wife does have an underlying condition because she of course recently had breast enlargement surgery. So there's and people say, like, oh, that's just cosmetic, and no, it really helped with her mental health a lot. In fact, you could even argue it might have saved our marriage. I mean, I told her that I think it probably did. And lastly, I think I deserve it because the vaccine is probably not really safe yet. And I think, as someone who has always been experimenting, always lived on the frontier of being an early adopter and taking chances, that I'm willing to put my body on the line for society, to sacrifice, to take that chance, to go ahead and be that guinea pig so the rest of society can, kind of follow along. Because, as I've always said, Rob, there are makers and takers, right? And I am a maker. And so I'm willing to do this for all the takers of the world.
I think you're one of the most altruistic douchebags I've ever met. Honest to God, I think that your altruism just bleeds uh, douche. You're a fucking douche. But you know
Thank
what?
you.
You exist. And I know you're a comedian, but you friggin' exist in the world. That character, you exist. I've met some of these people. Like I want to laugh. I want to cry. I want to, yeah. I mean, like you're right. Breast augmentation, that's an underlying condition. Yeah. The condition is you've got a freaking silicone sort of bubble in your breast. It's underneath, it's an underlying breast condition. But like, this is happening. This shit's happening. Although I have to say, they're clamping down on it a little bit. It's never gonna. There's always going to be a shadow sort of world where, you know, if you want to buy it, you can get it.
I just from the beginning I've assumed like, oh come on, only people 65 and essential. Bullshit. Don't tell me the CEO of Goldman Sachs can't find a way to get a vaccine if he wants it.
Assuming he's under
Which,
65, although I think he's over. But so go get it. Go get your vaccine. But yeah, I agree. Look, inequities have always existed from the beginning of time. They're a little bit more out of control probably now. The glaring sort of inequity of like, you know, I just watched an interview with President Zelensky, is it, of Ukraine?
who was a
And
comedian.
who was a comedian. And he talked about, he was interviewed on Axios on HBO. And, you know, unfortunately, they're having a really, really hard time getting the vaccine. And he said the only way he's been able to get some vaccine is to, couldn't get it in country, went to Russia. Russia basically said to him, oh, well, we're just not sure how safe our vaccine is. Thanks, Russia. We know you want more than just Crimea. But, and then he goes to his friends in the European Union, and they're like, you know what, we're going to help out. We're going to give you a little bit along the way. I mean, our people aren't going to be too happy about that. But he feels like he's a third, fourth class citizen, like Ukraine people don't matter, because the global vaccine program is not sort of, you know, all things for all people. It's all things for all political, economic strains. If you have more power in one area or the other, you're going to get a little bit more vaccine. But it's sad.
Well, like, do you know people who are like, I deserve to jump the line for the vaccine? Because I'm curious, what is the version that they give?
Well, the version they give is not so much. So I do know a couple people that have done it and have jumped the line. And their thought process, at least in terms of how they described it, wasn't so much, I deserve this, you know, I have a this and a that, and I'm a job creator. Like, I haven't met that douchebag character that you just drew for us, but they're almost like, you know what? I can go to Erewhon, the most expensive grocery store on the planet, and I could buy a, you know, $18 smoothie. Why can't I just go get a COVID vaccine? Way more important. So they actually go on a mission to solve a problem. So there's no consciousness.
What's the problem?
The problem is they don't have the vaccine. They want the vaccine. They don't have the consciousness that they have to wait in line. They don't have the sort of empathy that probably the healthcare worker, the over 65 person, the underlying condition person, et cetera, should actually, you know, they should follow the protocol. Why? Entitlement, fear, a lot of fear, though. These people have a lot of fear, probably more so from the reasons that you described. I'm a very important person. I do a lot of very important things. I should
Well,
actually.
also, the more you have, the more you live in fear. I believe is you're constantly afraid of losing it.
That's right. There's a level of entitlement that exists. You know, when John Edwards ran for the nomination and had to drop out because of his affair while his wife was dying of cancer. You know, the one thing he said after was, you know, when he had his, you know, come to Jesus moment is, I just felt, you know, entitled. I felt like I deserved it. Like, why shouldn't I get it? When Tiger Woods, and I just watched that Tiger Woods special the 2-episode special on I guess it's Netflix on HBO. One of the things he said when he came out was like, I got to the point where I thought I could basically screw any woman I wanted, and when I wanted, didn't matter that I had kids and a wife. I felt entitled. I got to this point. There's a level of entitlement that comes along with being part of a society that says, if you have 100 million or 1 billion in the bank, you are entitled to whatever the fuck you want. And I am certainly a capitalist. Let's be clear. I love making money. I do well enough, and like creating jobs and like creating, lots of money. But the question is, how much money do you really need for yourself? What percentage of your income are you actually giving to philanthropic, charitable environments? But people who are jumping the line aren't thinking that way. They're only thinking about what's best for them.
Yeah. And that's, for a lot of them, that's probably how they got to where they are, is by behaving that way and thinking that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Matt, this has been fun. This is our first experience on Haps. I hope we didn't bore the shit out of anyone. And that anyone, when I say by anyone, I'm assuming that there's actually people watching. So if you're not out there, well, then I guess it doesn't really matter. But if you are, we'd love to see you sometime again on the Apple, on our Apple podcast. Obviously, audio only. We're gonna show up here, I think, a few more times and see how it goes.
Yeah, and the podcast isn't just on Apple. It's on anywhere you listen to podcasts, Overcast, Spotify, all your other podcast network platform thingies, whatever they're called. Hell and Wellness is the name of the show. I'm Matt Ruby. I'm on. I've got a newsletter, mattruby.substack.com. That's a weekly thing. That's cool. And then I'm on Twitter at Matt Ruby and on Instagram at RubyMatt. And you got anything you want to plug, Rob?
I don't have too much I want to plug because I'm, as you said, I'm not that big social media guy. But I'm looking over here at the live chat. It looks like we've got a hello from Los Angeles, Pablo De La Hoya. Are you a De La Hoya? Are you that boxer guy or related to boxer? Or is that De La Hoya? Was that the guy's name? Somebody from St. Petersburg. Call out. What's happening? Yassine, is that your name? Yassine Moore. We got Peter. Hey, I think we got 3 people.
Well, those are the people commenting. There can be plenty more people watching. Rob, okay. Yeah, I don't think you understand the technology. We're on the Twitter right now. We're on the Facebook. We're on the Instagram. There's people all over. These are just the people who happen to leave comments for us. That while this was happening. But there have been hearts flying by on the screen. There's been all kinds of people throwing their phone down, angry at your views on the world. So don't sell yourself short here.
Okay. All right. So we got to do this again, I guess.
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. Well, wait, Matt.
Yes.
What part of the world are you in right now?
Right now, I am in New Orleans, Louisiana, although I typically reside in Brooklyn, New York.
Uh-huh. And what you doing in New Orleans?
Letting the good times roll / doing a pandemic in a slightly larger apartment and escaping blizzards and things like that.
Ain't no Mardi Gras happening in pandemic world, is there?
There is. It's not indoors, but people are designing their houses as floats, which is pretty cool. And then there's sort of, I think they're doing like an outdoor sort of walk-in type Mardi Gras thing as opposed to the indoor festivals. But I don't know if there's like a big parade or anything like that.
Nice. All right. Well, have fun in New Orleans.
I'll do my best. Enjoy California. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Bye, everyone.